Jesus.
Recording. That was loud.
That was loud. Recording in progress.
Recording in progress.
That was quite loud. It didn't need to be that loud, did it?
No,
Absolutely not.
So, all right. So I need to...
Nate says he'll be here in a sec. So that's fine. We've got 15 minutes. We're good. Do our little normal chit chat. Get the intro ready. Here is Nate.
Here is Nate.
Any second.
Hello.
There he is.
Hey.
How's it going?
It's good. We're already recording, so that's done.
Nice. Neil, where are you broadcasting from? What depths of space?
So this, I believe, is the Millennium Falcon, and I also saw that there was a TV filter, so I just thought that was funny. But
that works.
I missed those TVs, man. That was the day.
Oh yeah, with the dials.
Oh yeah, with the dials. Yeah. How you been, Nate?
I've been good. Yeah, just kind of getting caught up with things after taking some time away. Takes forever, man.
Yeah, sure does.
Yeah.
We've finally got sun. I mean, Neil, don't chip in with how hot it is with you. We're happy with our 23 or 24 degrees and sunshine. We're finally seeing sunshine.
Dude, we had an unusual heat wave that was like stationed over us, a heat dome, as they call it. And it wasn't as muggy as I thought it was going to be, which was nice because then it just is unbearable. So It was a little dry, but it was hot. I know
you want humidity and mugginess come where I am.
On the hottest day of the whole like heat dome, I did my once a year golf outing with a group of friends, and it was easily 100 degrees.
Yeah, it's been
Fahrenheit.
easily
like it was just brutal.
It's ridiculous out there.
I drank so much water that day.
That's the key.
Yeah. That's what you got to do.
Yeah.
Always got to have a water bottle with you. Always.
I've done the criminal sin this week of that we all say you don't need to do is I'm investigating another DAW for mastering in. So, I mean, why would I do that? Why would I start with a whole blank canvas of I don't know how any of this works? But I am looking at Wave Labs again, Nate.
Yeah, you looked at it and then you said no.
Yeah, because it's the most complicated thing on the planet.
What's changing your mind again?
Because I think it's massively powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, there's a few bugs in Studio One which annoy me, but it does look like it's incredibly powerful. It's just going to be one of those horrific learning curves that's like a sheer face of a cliff until I get to grips with it a bit. And it's one of those things until you get your template set up, if you know what I mean. Until you're at the point where you drop a file in, put it to the right levels, set all this, and your template is effectively ready to go. It's a bit of which bit of the screen do I click on first? Because there's a million buttons. So I thought, I really should give it a go though, because it does look like it's super powerful.
All right, yeah.
Why would I do that? Mate?
I just bought a new lighting piece of hardware called Maestro DMX, and it's AI light show.
Nice.
So it listens to the audio.
That's awesome.
And it through AI figures out what should be in real time. What lights, what the color, all the attributes to all the lights. So instead of me with a pedal on the ground, with a MIDI pedal on the ground, like pressing buttons to change the light colors at different times in the song, which can be a pain in the butt because like you're doing a whole bunch of other stuff, playing guitar, singing, that it can get distracting thinking about the lights too, that maybe this will help with that and I don't have to think so much.
Nice. That sounds cool.
So it is an expensive piece of gear, but I hope it works. Just got it yesterday. So
you also have the learning curve of trying to make it work.
Yep.
Yeah. We all love those. All love those.
Yeah. I'm doing a learning curve thing. I'm implementing some hardware into my universe. Kind of stepping outside of the box a little bit. And it's a learning curve because you think that a plugin that you use that has a hardware version works the same. It doesn't.
No.
Doesn't work the same as the hardware version. And so getting used to that and implementing a new patch bay and just sort of like my studio is kind of on the floor right now, or partially on the floor, as I'm getting everything connected and sort of getting used to a true hybrid setup. So once it's all done, I think I'll be really happy with the results. Kind of
all over the place,
stressful and chaotic.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm quite pleased that mine is basically, my studio is now scaled right back from where it was, and it's very, very lean now. But that's all I need for mastering, right? I need good monitoring environment, some good in the box hardware, and away we go. So
yeah, I wanted I've always been enamored with the hardware workflow, even from the early days of learning this, learning how to mix and using plugins. I never liked the really like non-GUI based plugins that didn't relate to a piece of hardware. Like there's tons of 1176 emulations out there, but I never understood how they worked until I actually used an 1176 emulation that looked like an 1176. And then like it made sense to me, right? Same with an LA2A, same with lots of other plugins. Like all these weird emulations, or like even the Reaper ones where they're all like text-based. You know, like those are great. They're super analytical, but I just didn't think that way. It didn't make sense to me until I started using plugins that looked like their real counterparts. And I've always just been enamored with how that workflow actually works. I think I would have loved working in the day and age of tape. That I think that would have been a lot of fun. But we're not there anymore.
And it wasn't. Trust me.
And it was.
Cutting and splicing tape, and just trust me, it's not. I mean, it has a nice warm sound to it, and you can do crazy things where you push the inputs and get funny. But yeah, the actual process of can we do another take? Hold on a minute. Hold on, we're just backing up. Okay, go. It's like no, it's just not.
Wow, you did that really well, man.
Yeah, I stopped at exactly the right place. That's why. So years of practice. I mean, SMPTE time codes made it better, so you could use your computer to just go back to there. But even then, you still had to wait for it to spool in the direction, and it was much better recording in the box.
Well, so that's an interesting thought. So a friend of mine that lives 5 minutes down the road from me, he is all about tape. He's got like 2 or 3 tape machines in a home studio that is no bigger than mine. His life is working on tape. And so I wanted to do an episode. I think I mentioned this way early on, doing a tape episode.
Yeah.
And he would be our guest, because he has a ton of experience working on tape, the good and the bad and the ugly. And
Yeah, definitely down for that.
I think that would be an interesting conversation, especially with your background, with working on tape. And I love tape, but I don't have any experience with it. And tape emulation plugins and, all of this. I was talking to him one day and he's like, I still haven't found a tape emulation plugin that actually sounds like tape. They get close, but have not yet found one that nails it. And I think with all plugins, that's kind of how it works. I don't think there's any plugin out there that nails the hardware emulation.
No, I think but I think all of them, they will sound like a tape machine. They might not sound like a tape machine you've heard or that you had. It's a bit like a 1176.
Sure. There's no 2 pieces of hardware that will sound alike anyway.
Exactly. And that is the joy of the hardware, right? That's why you have a console, because your console sounds like your console.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like an average version of your console. It's your console with the crackle on channel 4 that you can't get rid of, and but that's what makes it.
Is that kind of like artificial flavoring, where like it's not bad, it's not exactly the original thing, like banana flavor or
it's a generic banana flavor, not that particular banana.
I don't know,
Right.
man. Those banana Laffy Taffies are pretty spot on.
So, like, I mean, it tastes good, but it's not like using actual banana, right? But
No.
it's still good. And so, like, I'm thinking, like, so yeah, tape is great and it sounds great. It's a flavor, right?
Yeah.
And you're trying to reproduce it artificially. And it's not either bad or good. It's just different flavors.
Absolutely.
I was trying to make
Sure.
an analogy.
No, that works perfectly.
Oh, it works.
Well, there's our intro. Banana chat.
I was actually just thinking that. I'm like, I think we just did the intro, guys.
That's the intro. Banana chat is the intro.
Banana chat. All right. Well, I guess we'll cut to intro.
Let's do it.
Hi, and welcome to Sound Discussion. Each episode, we discuss a music topic which we have all had first-hand experience with. This will be anything from getting started, recording, playing live, mixing, mastering, and everything in between. Most episodes, we will have a special guest to bring their professional experience to the discussion. So, let's get started.
Today's guest is a dynamic force in the music industry, known for her expertise in audio engineering and production. She has worked with some of the biggest artists on the planet, including Katie Tunstall, Colleen Bailey-Rae, Little Man Tate, Girls Aloud, and many, many others. During her time at the BBC Maida Vale studio, she worked on sessions for Radio 1, Radio 2, 1Extra, and 6 Music. At Music Mix Pro, our guest very much believes that all independent bands and artists should have the same broadcast quality releases of major label artists. Combining cutting-edge technology with her creative flair to produce top-notch mixes, she enables artists to bring their musical visions to life. Whether you're an aspiring musician or a seasoned pro, her insights and experience in the world of music production are sure to inspire and inform. We are excited to have her with us today. Please welcome to the show, Sara Carter.
Hello.
Hello.
Wow. What an amazing introduction.
There you go.
What am I? A powerhouse or something?
You are a dynamic force in the music industry.
That is amazing. I'm going to put that on my business cards.
I'll send it. That's what you get if you Google you on the internet.
Right. That's. I'm. As soon as we get off this call, I'm going to do that and laugh a lot, I imagine.
It's really hard to build your own sort of bio. You just have to rely on the internet anymore, right? Because
I know. It's
you
scary.
can't talk yourself up as well as Google can.
No, that's right, because you have this. Well, I do. I have this bias where it's that imposter syndrome that's still deep inside.
Yeah, we did a whole episode on that.
Yeah.
Oh,
We did a whole
really?
episode.
Episode
Joe
2.
Gilbert.
Go back and listen to that if you haven't.
I will.
But that is,
will.
it is very real, and I don't think it ever goes away.
Absolutely.
I think
absolutely.
we legitimately decided on that episode that it never goes away. So
No, that's right. I think you can learn to deal with it and manage it. But I think that once it's there, unless you can conquer your fear by doing it repetitively over and over and over and over and over again, then you've pretty much stuck with it. That's the reason I left the BBC, was imposter syndrome. So
really?
Yeah. I didn't know it then.
Do you think that if you had stayed, fought through that or whatever, would things, how different would your path be?
Oh gosh,
I know it's hard to tell the future and all that stuff, but
Yeah, no, it would be really different. But when I think about it now, I mean, we've just got Glastonbury is kicking off, and that was the biggest festival for us, for our team at the BBC. And we used to do the sound in the trucks at the back of the stages, various stages, for the TV, before the TV shows. But yeah, had I stayed, I would have progressed to have been running one of those trucks. And that still scares me to death. And I'm just, I think it's just that fear of failing. It's still there. So, the path would have been very, very different. But I love where I'm at right now. Suits me better, and I'm happier for it. The BBC was fantastic. great training ground. I worked with some amazing people, all those, the big name people that you mentioned in the intro, courtesy of the BBC and assisting in sessions there, running one or two. And I loved it. Loved every minute of it, really. Apart from, it wasn't all, sunshine and unicorns. I loved working at Maida Vale Studios and doing sessions, but I didn't love doing the sort of daytime shows that much. But it's all part of the job, and it's great training. It's it really builds up those critical listening skills and working methodically, all that kind of thing, which I'm really grateful for.
I always sort of grew up being told that if you did sound for the BBC, it's, that's like the pinnacle of where you learn your trade. Do you still think that's true? Do you?
I absolutely, I do. Yes. I paused because I was running through my mind, the various institutions, educational institutions that are out there. But really that sort of, the BBC was all hands on, and it was live performances. And if you made a mistake, millions would hear it. Hence the imposter syndrome, I think, and just living in the anxiety of fear of that. But yeah, it was like an old-fashioned apprenticeship, really. And I think that being enveloped by that sort of talent day in, day out, you don't get that. I don't think you get that in a university or any sort of further education, that actual hands-on, one-to-one working with big named artists. And that sort of sense, that studio sense of, being a good studio assistant and what that means. And that was a really great training ground for me to be able to get on with a lot of people and to progress through the BBC as well.
Yeah,
it's certainly a common thing I've heard from people that, going and getting an audio education from a university or one of those sort of like trade-ish sort of programs is all well and good, but nothing will ever beat just being thrown into the fire and, having to figure it out and learning that way. You could probably say that with lots of various university-based educations. Textbook will never replace real life experience.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I did that sort of further education training before I got into the BBC as well. So the two of them together really have been. I wouldn't do anything differently. If I could turn back the clock, I would do exactly that, the same thing. And I was just grateful at the time in my life that I was at to be even offered a job, anything like what the BBC was offering, because I was too old really to get into studios at that sort of studio assistant level. And they, you were lucky if you even got paid in that sort of job. So being in my sort of mid-30s at that time, I had commitments.
Yeah,
and
you needed a paycheck.
Yeah, I had bills to pay. So that the BBC was an absolute blessing, and it was one of the high points of my life so far, was being offered that job. I know where I was. I can see it in my mind now. It was absolutely amazing, which made leaving such a difficult decision. And we've already covered that. So, but it's been wonderful to get back into it. I needed a break from it because of that, a break from audio, which I did for a few years. But that was great because that made me realise that this is what I really want to do. It's what I was meant to do, I think, without getting too kind of woo-woo about anything. But I dabbled, I stepped foot back into it, and it's been great ever since. Just, loving every minute of it, loving the new opportunities, and loving teaching people, which that surprised me. But, you live and learn.
Yeah. I've had a similar experience. I'm a violinist, and I learned violin growing up, and partially enjoyed it. I guess it was something my parents really wanted me to do, and you're 11 years old. What choice do you have? You're gonna play the violin because your parents want you to do it. So once I got into college and decided to try and make that my major, performance major, I realized that wasn't for me. Right?
Wow.
That was a different world than I had sort of grown up in, playing the violin. A performance major was very much, after one semester, I realized, this is not what I want to do. I'm going to put my violin away. And I did for probably 10 years. And I brought it back out and started playing it again, probably a few years before I had a child. And it was kind of weird how much I remembered and felt very comfortable and natural to just play the violin, and I enjoyed it again, much more than I ever did, in my teens, and picking it up as an adult and relearning some things, and I found it very enjoyable and very much that sort of like, this is kind of my instrument. This is what I, was meant to play. And certainly I'm not Joshua Bell or anything like that, but it's an enjoyable thing. And I found it kind of like, riding a bike. You just sort of remember how to do it, and you have fun with it.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing.
So what did you do when you weren't doing music? You said you had a few years away. What did you do?
Yeah.
Was it anything exciting? Did you travel the world? And
No. I was a head brewer in a microbrewery.
Well, that
amazing.
sounds like an awesome job.
We should talk about that. That sounds amazing.
Let's talk about beer.
Yeah. That it was. I've always enjoyed ale, real ale, beer, and I grew up in a pub, so it was kind of in the blood, I suppose.
Yeah.
But whilst I was at the BBC, I started home brewing. And it was my outlet, really. It was how I relaxed. And I entered a few competitions. I won a few competitions as well. And it all kind of coincided at the same point when I wasn't particularly happy at the BBC and getting more and more anxious. And I just wanted to find some space so that I could take stock of where I was and what I wanted to do with my future. And so I wrote to a local brewery and asked if they had any job vacancies, and they did. And that was it, really. That was the catalyst for leaving the BBC. I had somewhere to go to. And I loved it for the first few years. It was really relaxing, fun, still creative, coming up with recipes and what have you, and actually making something that people enjoyed. And but then, the second sort of half of that stint again started to get bored, really, and started to question what went wrong with music for me and why I didn't listen to music that much anymore. And it was at that point that I kind of came to terms with or learned about imposter syndrome, and I thought, oh well, I identified with it completely. So it was so refreshing to actually get to know what was happening, why I'd felt how I'd felt, and that there was nothing wrong with me, or I hadn't thrown away or squandered the best chance ever of working in the career that I wanted to. And I got some help with that with hypnotherapy, believe it or not.
Ah.
And I was able to deal with that issue. And it was the strangest thing. It was about a month after I'd finished the therapy. And out of nowhere, a thought popped into my head, listening to music. I loved that kick drum, sounds great. I wonder how they did that. And I thought, where on earth did that come from? Because I'd not had that thought in years, because I'd retreated from that. You see, I would, went to my safe place, and I just didn't entertain that kind of deep thinking or critical thinking about music anymore. And there it was, and I really felt the desire to want to do it again. It's the weirdest thing, and so I did. Which is how it was kind of like, that's how I learned about Joe Gilder, really, was because I think the first DAW that I had at that point was Studio One. And he did all the PreSonus training videos.
Yeah.
And so that's how I kind of I learned about him. I liked his style.
What year was this?
2000 and 2014 maybe, something like that. 2013.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, brewing, that was my thing.
Wow.
Hence, I don't brew now. I don't brew these days. In fact, I don't drink that much at all these days. So yeah.
Very interesting. Very
That's
interesting.
really cool.
Breweries are a great place for live music. I don't know if they are in England.
Craft breweries. Yeah,
craft breweries,
the boom, happened in Britain, off the back of what was going on in the US. And then it kind of spread all over the world, really. But yeah, that's my favorite type of beer, really. That sort of craft produced ale that's got lots of flavor.
Mm-hmm. Small batch.
Yes. But yeah, I don't brew anymore.
Wow.
So,
but you master brewer. I mean, there you go.
Yeah.
Head brewer.
Head brewer.
Master brewer is another level.
Head brewer. There you go.
But a head brewer. But
none of us can claim to be that.
No,
we just drink beer. I think that's as close as we get.
I've thought about, maybe getting some homebrew supplies, but I need another hobby, like a hole in my head. So
yeah.
I like that I get to try all the beer I'm playing at a brewery next week, and they always like, hey, try this one, or here, try that one. So
it's cool.
Nice.
Live music is the only job I've ever had where it's encouraged to drink.
Yes.
Absolutely. So when we chatted over email, which was great, we sort of touched on a topic to talk about, which I think you sort of said you'd be sort of most interested in. And I think we don't try and stick to it too. If you listen to any of the other episodes, you'll find they wander all over the place.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so we sort of touched on the use of reference tracks in studios or how you use reference tracks and that sort of thing. And one of the things that comes up quite a lot when we talk to other people is, should I be using reference tracks? Should I not be using reference tracks? How do we use reference tracks? Let's just kick this and try and get back on track for 2 minutes. What's your views on reference tracks? Are they something you use a lot, or are they sparingly at certain points?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent for the use of reference tracks, only because it works for me. And I just find that they provide me with boundaries, or they provide me with a goal for the mix. And I think you need to have that. You need to know where you're going when you start a mix, really, or have an idea. And reference tracks do that for me. What reference tracks also do for me is they help me make decisions faster. So I'll use reference tracks not all the time. I'm not constantly going backwards and forwards, but whenever when I'm unsure about something, then I'll go to a reference track to kind of just sanity check my idea, really. And so, I highly recommend the use of reference tracks. And I know some people don't like you to use them because they talk about how it will stifle their creativity and all that kind of thing. And if that's the case, I understand that. But so long as you have got some other method of checking your mix so that when it's out there in the real world, it isn't, complete, really saturated in the high end, lots of, fizzy sounding elements, or the low end isn't super muddy, and that you've really made use of the entire sound stage, then fine. But I find references actually spark ideas for me, not confine, keep me in a box or it's like presets on plugins, effects plugins particularly. I don't claim to be particularly brilliant at using effects, but when I'm stuck, I know what sounds wrong and I know what sounds right. And I find that if I'm kind of stuck, then presets are a great way to get out of that.
People love to hate on preset surfing.
Yes.
And I never understood why, because it gives you a great way to go quickly through some settings and find something that is in your ballpark, and then you tweak it from there. Like, what's the problem with that?
Yeah.
I do it on my live console all the time. It's like, okay, I got somebody else I'm plugging in, and they've got a guitar, and you've got to think fast because you don't have time to sit there and play their music over and over again and tweak stuff. You're like, well, preset. What are the presets? Oh, male vocal or male or guitar, acoustic guitar. Just click that. Start with that.
In the ballpark, and then go from there.
Yeah, and and so long as you can discern, that's working, or no, that's not working, then that is great to go down that path. I don't particularly buy into presets on any kind of dynamics plugins, particularly because that matters. The input level matters so much, and that can change from session to session, from track to track. So, but having said that, like you've just said, Neil, male vocal, it will perhaps give you the attack and release settings that are a good starting point.
Oh yeah, and you do have to adjust the input gain, but at least that's like you're focusing on that as opposed to, well, what should the attack and release be, and then you go to that part. Like once you get the input, then it's a faster workflow.
Yes.
Because you've got something to start with rather than everything at zero, and you're like, okay, now I've got 15 knobs that I've got to turn up.
Yes.
And the guitarist is over there already plugged in, ready to go, and the audience is out there, and it's like, okay, what do I do?
Yeah, and speed is so important in mixing as well, in order to get into that flow or to keep that energy going. And reference tracks kind of help me do that as well because of that decision-making element. If, let's say it's something like a snare level. Is my snare balanced? I might go to a reference track just to check the relationship between the snare and the vocal in a particular style of music. And within seconds, I know that. And I know that if I hadn't done that and that wasn't the case, then everything I do after that is built on that relationship, and it could take the mix in a whole bad direction that is almost impossible to unpick at the end. So, that element or that aspect of mixing and trying to keep that flow going so that you can make decisions in that heightened creative headspace is really important for me.
That's it. That's interesting that you had mentioned that it like reference tracks can inspire your mix.
Yeah.
I never thought of it like that. I'd always okay, is my mix muddy? Is, you know, I wouldn't use reference tracks that often when I did mix. It was more of an after I'm done with my mix, I want to see, you know, but you're talking like use it in the beginning and then that can inspire your mix. That's interesting.
Yeah. I think that I've sort of recognized the fact that I'm not a music producer. I never have been. I've not been that. My brain just doesn't work that way. I think probably because I've never been a brilliant musician. You know, literally just playing chords on the guitar or playing some simple bass lines. That's about the extent, really. I learned early on that it was more the technical side and capturing the recordings that I really enjoyed. And so kind of stepped away from the musicianship side of things. And so that sort of way of thinking like a music producer and thinking about arrangement and thinking about building up and melodies and textures, and that's not really my first skill. So that's where listening to reference tracks, particularly high quality, well written, well arranged songs that I really love, is able to help me be more creative in that mixing process.
I was going to say, I think you've raised a really interesting point about reference tracks, because it was mentioned earlier, people who don't use reference tracks, and I don't use reference tracks. I dislike reference tracks. Ooh. and I'll explain why. Because as I said, you've raised a really interesting point. I have tracks that I think sound phenomenal. So I'm a mastering engineer. That's the bit I do in the process. Don't do any mixing, no recording. I'm a mastering engineer. And I have songs that I know sound phenomenal. And they sound great in here, and I know how they sound. And I have a list on my Apple Music playlist of studio reference tracks. They are tracks that I know sound great. The bit that I think is different, and I think you actually use them in a very similar way to me, is I used to have it where clients said, here's my album to mix, here's my 2 reference tracks for you to reference against. And it's like, I don't want those. You are giving it to me to make it sound as good as I can based on the material you've given me. I know what good sounds like because I've listened to 10,000 hours on these speakers, and I know. So I think there's a difference between people's perception of, I give you a track because I want it to sound like that, which is what I really hate personally as a bugbear, and an inspirational or technical, I know this sounds good. How does my mix, master, whatever, stack up against that?
Yes.
And I think you and I are coming from the same place. But when people say to me, do you use reference tracks? I say, no, I don't. Because I don't want them sending me a track for their project to say, here's my songs. I want it to sound like Nirvana, Bleach. And it's like, well, first off, you're not Nirvana. Second off, you've written...
Well, there's a big difference between reference tracks and inspirational tracks, right?
Yeah.
So the whole, like, here's my band, here's what we did, and we love Nirvana. Here, you know, we want to sound like this. They're never gonna sound like that. But that in the creation phase is an excellent marker for someone to, you know, hold up against their music as they're creating their music. But when it comes to mixing or mastering, that's not going to work, and that's not what that's for.
Yeah. It's an aesthetic thing as well for me. It gives me an idea of where, you know, what my client thinks, you know, what sounds good to them. So it helps me, because you can't explain that in email particularly well, because the words around sound are so subjective and fluffy and airy-fairy. You know, they mean different things to different people. So if they could send me a link to a track, a reference mix that can inform me on the energy, the vibe, the dynamics, the loudness, the parameters in terms of how low they like the lows, how high they like the highs, how buried they like the vocal, or, you know, that it just gives me so much more information than trying to make sense of these subjective words.
Yeah.
So I just got so used to working like that. And even working at the BBC, my mentors, particularly if we were going into a session with a very well-known artist, they would play a mix of their own that they'd done that they know sounded great. They would take it home. They knew it sounded great wherever they listened to it at home, but they would play it in the studio before getting to work, really, before setting the session up. So
was that so you could get the balance of how it sounded in that studio from an environment
on those monitors, in that studio, in the BBC, in Maida Vale, there were in the section of the BBC where I worked, we would work over three different studio spaces, all of different sizes, with different monitoring. The sort of studio main speakers were different in each studio, but the near fields were the same. So that was something. So just to calibrate, and the desks were different in some studios as well. So just to calibrate the ears, really, and to build up a more recent audio memory for sound in that studio on that equipment, which is another great reason, particularly in live sound, for using references. Or if you work around many studios, if you are blessed to be able to do that, just being able to play a few seconds from 2 or 3 reference tracks so that you can just get a handle on the lows, on the highs, and where the sort of vocal is gonna, where it's gonna sit.
Where's that phantom center sitting?
Yeah, and that sort of depth element as well. It's not just width, but actually that the depth element in mixes.
You said something early on when you were talking about in the sort of beginning of the show, and you had talked about one day the thought popped into your head about, boy, that kick drum, how did they get that sound? And I thought that was actually a really beautiful tie-in, because a lot of times for me, kind of like what Ben does, I'll build a list of songs where I hear an element, a kick drum, a violin, a guitar, a vocal, a delay throw, something that sparks my interest. And I've put it into a playlist to go back and sort of listen to it with critical ears and see what it is that I liked about that. And I'd say 8 times out of 10, that track that initially grabbed my attention stays on that playlist for that reason. And it's sort of like a like you were saying, kind of like a preset thing. Like, I like that kick drum, and that kick drum sounded gonna work in some capacity in some project, right? And so now I have something I can listen to. And I think that that's a really attainable way for people to utilize reference tracks, because they're not bouncing around from studio to studio. Most people are not, right?
No.
And they may not really utilize reference tracks at all, or maybe in the way that they think people utilize reference tracks. But picking up your favorite song, and it has to be a song that you like, right? Because if you don't like the song, then
it's pointless.
What's the point? It's not useful to you. But if you like the song, it speaks to you, and that the element jumps out at you, a kick drum, a snare drum, a vocal, file it away. Grab that and save that for inspiration, for creative spark when you're thinking, oh, this mix needs something. Yeah. Oh, I heard that one vocal on that one song. Let me go listen to that. And there's a delay throw in there. Ah, okay, I can try that.
Yeah.
That could be that creative spark you were talking about. But there's so many different ways to use reference tracks.
Oh, it's endless.
We've touched on a few of them. So I wanted to throw that one out there, because I thought that when you were talking earlier on, you said that about the kick drum in that one song, and I was like, that's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
I lost. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to talk about the perspective change that you get when you listen to a reference track. That sort of sudden shift in energy from your speakers into your ears can really kickstart you, or if you get stuck, it can really get the creative juices flowing again. And it's there. I often refer to them as being like goalposts. So it's just, in terms of the frequency balance of the mix, every so often I'll go back to a reference mix, to the reference track, just to make sure I haven't pushed things too much in the low end or in the high end. And while also at that point, you're changing perspective, which can really highlight, when you go back to the mix, anything that other than that is potentially heading in the wrong direction.
So when you're listening to those reference tracks against your music, or the song you're mixing, you're checking the high end, the low end, and whatnot. Are you also watching any metering?
Am I watching any metering? Yeah, I guess I may flick over to the sort of spectrum analyzer view. Mm-hmm. I use the Metric AB plugin for my references.
Okay.
And that tool provides, half a dozen maybe different meters to use for different things. And they have the spectrum analyzer there, which you can set to different, either to different octaves or to the more traditional plot analysis. And I find that using that sort of octave, the bar chart kind of view, and being able to compare can be informative. But to be honest, I think because of the stage I'm at and the amount of experience I've had, that view doesn't change much when I flick between a reference and the mix. I think I'm close enough there, but it can be really useful for people that haven't mixed for as long and want some sort of clue as to where they should look to fix that muddy low end. That sort of metering can really help with that. When referencing, maybe stereo width, mm-hmm. maybe, and checking the correlation meter just to make sure there's nothing odd there in terms of phase.
Yeah. Well, I asked because 2 weeks ago I was listening to the new Billie Eilish record, and I've always been a big fan of her music and what she does with her brother, and so I brought up my metering plugin to just sort of see what was happening, because it sounded wonderful, and I wanted to see what the meters were telling me as far as the spectrum analyzer and width and all that, and correlation, and there was what I was hearing didn't quite match up to what I was seeing on the spectrum analyzer as far as high end and certainly low end. There was so much low end, and in the high end I saw on a lot of those songs dropped off dramatically after 12K, 15K, but it didn't sound like that. And so that's what my brain was trying to sort of process, is it doesn't sound muffled. It doesn't sound stifled in the high end. It sounds clear, and I hear some semblance of air and breath in the high end. But that's not what the meter's showing me. So I was really confused by that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point, and it's something that I've noticed as well. To tell people or suggest that people not be so reliant on spectrum analyzers because exactly what you've said, what you're hearing doesn't correlate with what you're seeing. It just doesn't make sense. So the use of spectrum analyzers, in my opinion, is just to give you little clues. Just, if you see something, it'll help you pinpoint sibilance. It'll help you pinpoint, something you're hearing in the mix.
Poking out.
Something, you'll see it. Something really kind of, and so they're useful for that. But if you're trying to match a mix, if you were to do that, if you were to have two different mixers, and or a mix and a reference track, and you were then trying to EQ your mix to match in terms of the spectrum analyzer, it just wouldn't work.
Yeah. And there's those EQ matching plugins that allow you to do just that.
Yeah. I know.
And I'm not going to say.
Don't get me started.
I know. I'm not gonna go too far down. I'm not gonna say who does this. I think everyone
plugins
knows
that do that.
Yeah.
Wait, I've been out of the mixing game for so long. What's going on?
You can load up a reference track into this plugin, and it will capture the overall, EQ curve from any. I'm not sure if it's an average or if you can pick it from a point in the song, but then you can literally take that EQ curve and apply it to your song, and that might be great for things like this, for talking podcasts. If you have someone on your show that's wildly out of, touch with their EQ, okay, you can rein that in. But like with music, I don't see how that's useful. I if someone wants to chime in and send us an email as to like how wrong I am on this, great, do that. But I don't see how it's useful.
I think so. I can think of a use of it. If you're doing an album or an EP and you've mixed all of it, and you just want and it basically it's all recorded at the same time. It's all the same, and you just want to give it a slight continuity.
You add that consistency to an overall record.
So you do all your mixes, you get all your tracks done, and then as part of the mix or master, you take one as your primary track, and then you use 8%, 10% of just having it all pitched the same way. I can get it. I get it. I mean, if that's what you want to do.
But to the other side of that isn't a having some variety and maybe, having a song that is just doesn't sound at all like the rest of the record. Isn't that sort of the fun of?
That's not modern music, Nate. What are you talking about? That's called the 70s, my friend. Good Lord.
I think these tools are amazing, but like they need to be just used as tools, like not instead of
tools, right?
I think if you go it'd be a red flag, as you said, Ben, using no more than 8% or something. It'd be a red flag if you found that you were having to use double digits in terms of the mix percentage of one of these sort of matching type plugins. And that would be a signal to go back to the mix and start looking at it a little bit more critically, to find out why it's so wildly different. But I do get that, that sort of using an EQ plugin or a matching plugin like that, just to bring the mixes closer together in terms of consistency across an album, that would be a reasonable use, definitely.
It's about the only reasonable use I can think of, but
well, yeah. So there's one, okay, but
I think
for someone to take a song like, let's say, a Billie Eilish song, and apply that EQ curve to their song, it's not going to make you sound like Billie Eilish.
No,
because there is some very clever mastering going on that album, by the way.
Oh, I'm sure
that's quite a piece
magic.
Yeah,
there's a lot of mid-side magic happening, for sure. Yeah, that's another topic for another day. But I love the black magic of mid-side. It is interesting. It is fun what you can come up with. Yeah, that's another topic for another day.
I mean, just on that, I don't think I've done a master in the last 5 years where I haven't used mid-side. I mean, it is standard core sort of trade for a mastering engineer is just
I do
being
it on
able to
every
do
mix.
that. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So
do you do you pick out anything from your reference tracks and analyze the mid side to then
No, I don't.
take that?
No, actually.
Okay.
I think that's really great in a critical listening environment when you're training your ear. That's a really great thing to do, and Metric AB makes that really easy to do that. And sort of many other plugin songs, you can solo the sides and solo the mids. That is a great practice, ear training practice.
Yeah.
But in real life, in everyday life, I don't use it. I don't use it reference tracks that way.
Ear
training is a great thing, and maybe we talk about that for a brief moment, because I think that when people are thinking about reference tracks, when they're thinking about their favorite songs, they know the songs from a casual perspective. I mean, maybe they've grown up with that song, they know every word, but when it comes down to critically listening to that song, that is a totally different mindset. From a fan perspective and enjoying the music, and learning how to listen to those elements is something that is not always easy to do. And having a sort of like correlation between what you're hearing and maybe what you're seeing with metering, or if you have a mid-side plugin that can solo the sides and keep that information on the sides. Because I think that really tells you what's happening on the sides, channel of everything. And I don't like how some of those plugins will take the mid side and collapse it into the center, because then you lose that perspective, and it doesn't sound the same. So all of that to say, I think that ear training is really great for people to really do, so that they can learn how to critically listen to frequencies, and understanding what frequencies does a kick drum take up, what do those frequencies actually sound like, and learning to identify what that sounds like. And that will go a long way in allowing someone to move forward in how to listen to music critically, and then apply that to their project. Yeah, definitely.
I think depending on what stage you are in your learning, that being really conscious about building up those skills is really important. And maybe in the earlier stages of your experience, you might do it more often than, well, you would. I would hope do it more often than someone who's been doing it for many years. But it's so crucially important, because it all builds into the knock-on effect is that you're making your decisions faster again. You're mixing faster. You're in that flow state, and you're able to problem solve a lot more efficiently. And all that stems from your listening skills. And so it takes some input from you to be able to, if you're really serious about this, to put the time and effort in to learn and to train your ears. Just like a musician would sit down and play and learn and practice their instrument, as mix engineers or mastering engineers, as music producers, we really should be doing the same thing. And just, it doesn't have to be a long spell of time. It could only be 15 minutes. But as long as you can do it consistently and take the time to really analyze mixers from a zoomed out perspective, listening to the mix as a whole, and asking yourself questions through that playback, what do I like? Or recognizing something coming in on a new section of the song, and you think, that sounds great. I love how they've done that. And how have they done that? And thinking about it, and write notes, write. If writing is your thing, because that's there's
a great idea.
Magical
Writing down
happens.
These thoughts.
Yeah, when you put pen to paper, that analog experience is much more. It goes deeper in the psyche, I think, than just typing it on a digital notebook, on your computer somewhere.
Yeah.
Because you can't think of anything else in that moment other than the word you're writing. So there's no other distraction in that instance of you thinking about those words. And I think that just goes deeper than, as I said, than typing on your computer and up comes a notification. Oh, you got a new email from someone. And there's a lot to be said for that, I think, in helping in that critical listening circumstance. And it's the foundation for everything. So it mustn't be ignored.
And I think the more you can do that critical listening in the same environment all the time.
Oh yeah,
makes such a difference.
Yes, on the monitors in your studio. What comes before the critical listening is your environment, your listening environment, and obviously the state of your ears. It depends on how old you are, if you've got any hearing damage and all that. But you've got to make sure that your listening environment is as accurate as you can afford to make it, and otherwise you're just being told lies really by the room that you're in, and you're making decisions on wrong information. So yeah, when you reverse engineer it, the room acoustics, it plays a huge part in critical listening exercises. Sure, you can use headphones, which arguably may be a better way of practicing those sorts of exercises. So long as you can trust your headphones and you know how your headphones sound and you've listened to lots of music through them. I think it's a skill that can often get leapfrogged. People just want to get into the good stuff and buy more plugins, and and then at the end of the day, they're kind of like, why doesn't it sound? It just doesn't sound right. And they've not started out with a goal for the mix. They've not, the room may not be the best room in the world, a cube, and they just haven't quite got the hours in terms of understanding frequencies to be able to apply EQ correctly. So, yeah.
Well, I think the biggest thing there, aside from room acoustics, let's not dive
into that. Yes.
Yeah, that's whew, is the hours. It's just a game of time, right?
Yeah.
You can force feed yourself YouTube videos all day long, but until you actually clock in the hours, and like Ben said, 10,000 is probably the best place to start. And that's, for a lot of people that do this.
That's a long time.
Part-time, that's years. Years.
Yes.
So,
but that's really disheartening for beginners, for intermediate mixers even, who know that they've got day jobs
or people that move.
And families.
Or people that move. If you move, then you have to learn your speakers all over again in a new room.
It's one of those. Or that can be exciting because maybe you're moving to a better space, right?
Yeah, that could be too. But then, if your space is bigger, then you've got more reflections. Or like when I first started mixing, I was in a walk-in closet, and that with all the clothes and everything in there, it was a dead space already, and so it was great. It was great. My speakers sounded amazing, and then we bought a house and I got my own room for a studio, and that thing, my speakers didn't sound the same. I had to sit there. It was a little frustrating, but, PSA, you had mentioned, your hearing, making sure that your hearing is healthy and whatnot. I see so many people, whether they're in the studio or live, they have one ear in and one ear out with the headphones, with earbuds. And you should not do that. because one ear in, one ear out. If you're listening to music in one ear, that you're gonna just automatically turn it up way too loud, and you're gonna hurt your hearing. And I see this in live music all the time. I see people with one ear out, one ear in, because they want to hear the stage, they want to hear the audience, and I understand that, and I like that too. But if you've got two ears, if you got one ear out, your hearing is going to be compensated by the difference in loudness, and you're going to want to turn that volume up. And I was wondering for years why my ears hurt after a show, and it was because I just had it up way too loud when I plugged in the other one and I turned it down. Save your hearing. Don't use just one ear in, one ear out. PSA. Sorry.
Well, and to that point, go to an audiologist and get your hearing checked and plot it out on a graph. One of the most amazing experiences I had was when I went to my audiologist and said, "Give me a hearing test with the full audio spectrum, 20 to 20, not just the typical
speech.
The sort of typical range, about 800 hertz to maybe 2.5K. Give me the whole thing, right? I'm a musician. I want to know." And it was amazing to see what my ears could hear. And I was surprised to hear that, and she was surprised too. She's like, "Your hearing drops off at like 17K. I'm like, "Wow, I didn't know that. That's pretty good." For being 42 years old, I didn't think that I had that much hearing up there. So maybe I don't anymore, but
Actually, I had the same thing done because I had one ear out, one ear in. I didn't realize that was the actual problem, and I got my hearing checked because when you have music that loud, your ear naturally compresses, and you think, "Oh, where's the volume?" And then you turn it up even louder. And I was getting ringing in one ear, so I had it checked. And they're like, "Well, your hearing is perfect." And I think it was like 17K or around there. It was when it was dropping off. And they're like, "You just, you have selective hearing then, I guess."
Yeah.
Volume's amazing though, isn't it? Because I'm assuming you level match your reference tracks, because otherwise, I mean, apart
otherwise
from that,
it's not giving you accurate information. Otherwise, you have to level match.
Yes.
Has to be, we hear frequencies differently at different loudnesses, levels.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Fletcher-Munson curve, right?
Exactly, yeah. So you've got to listen like for like to get the true comparison. And, it's pointless otherwise.
And I think the interesting thing about all of this with reference tracks is it's very easy. You were saying not to get disheartened by because you haven't put 10,000 hours. You don't need to put 10,000 hours in your speaker. It's just the more time. It's an analogy, isn't it? The more time you put in, the more you will understand what you're listening to. But it's not going to
happen. It's not going to happen overnight, right?
Exactly.
That's the key takeaway there. Is this
not? If you're not going to
buy a set of plugins that have been, endorsed by somebody, it's not just going to happen. It takes time. However,
if you're on your third mix and then you bring up a mix by Bob Clearmountain and you think, why doesn't mine sound like that? First off, your tracks probably weren't recorded like that. We won't get into that because
there's many good reasons why your mix doesn't sound like Bob's. So.
We spoke to Mike Senior and had a whole conversation about recording and microphones, and so first off, yours wasn't recorded like that. But second, you're not Bob Clearmountain either. So and you're not sitting in one of the best studios in the world, massively acoustically treated, and with his whatever it is, 10,000 hours plus experience. So I think you don't have his ears. Yeah. So it's not to get disheartened. I didn't mean that you can only start mixing if you've got thousands of hours listening, because I think lots of people who listen to this they're probably mixing on headphones because they haven't got a room with monitors. But my thing would be just listen to music on those headphones. Listen to your favorite songs on those. So when you go to mix, you know what they sound like.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the value of reference tracks as well. It's because you know those headphones as well as you do now, you're able to do that cross-reference so much easier and it should help you make decisions. And then coupled with the critical listening by, you can take high pass and low pass filters, and you can listen to commercial tracks, and you can really just focus in on the lows, on the low mids, on the upper mids, you can really put 15 minutes a day in listening to tracks, and asking yourself questions about what you can hear, what you notice. And that's just going to be so helpful for you to then, when you zoom out and you listen to a mix, full fat, full spectrum, it's really going to help you pinpoint. And it will happen. The more you do it, the more you focus consciously, listening to a full mix and analysing it, listening to the kick drum, listening to the bass guitar, are the lows of the kick the lowest element in the mix, or is it the bass that's taking that all the low end energy? Listen to the guitars, the low end of the guitars. Are you actually hearing the low end of the guitars, or is it the upper end of the bass that's filling that information in for you? So it's be it that critical thinking, critical listening, decision making, is just the foundation of better mixers at the end of the day, really. And even though you haven't got the 10,000 hours, just doing a few minutes a day, it won't be that long before you're actually noticing the leaps and bounds you have made from when you first started. If there was maybe there's some way you could actually log your progress. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but some way then that you could go back and go, well, 6 months ago, this is what I thought. But now I think completely differently, and look how this mix sounds now. I wish there was a way to be able to do that in what we do. There must be some sort of way, but to be able to look at your progress retrospectively.
Certainly you can go back and look at your mixes from 6 months ago, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you could remix
over time, you should get better. Yeah. I would caution, though, using reference tracks too much, maybe, because I remember I lost a mix contest years ago because we had a punk song and there was like 33 mix engineers, and I think I got third place, and I think the reason why was because I used a Green Day song and I noticed how buried the vocal was in the Green Day song. And I copied that. My guitar tone was spot on. Everything was spot on. But the vocal was just buried just a little too much for everybody else's taste. And I think I got third place because of that.
Yeah.
Well, you said one really critical word, and that was taste.
Yeah.
That's
all of this. Reference tracks. This is 101% subjective.
Yeah.
Right? That is where you think you had a flaw there, but really it's just what it comes down to taste. So those people that listened to that song didn't like how it was buried, but in reality, it's a perfectly good song, and that mix, I'm sure, will stand up against others just fine. So I think a lot of this is you need to remember that this is you're listening to somebody else's art. And you're trying to apply that template to yourself. And there's no one-to-one relationship here. There's nothing that's going to match up from that to yours. It is all subjective. It is art. And you have to internalize that and think of that. Keep that in mind when you're doing this.
But I think even when I was using that reference track, even I thought the vocal was a little and then I started listening to Green Day. I was like, are the vocals way too buried on Dookie? And I was just even thinking that to myself, and I'm like, but this is a reference track. I'm gonna use it as gospel. And I wish I had done the gut check and just turned up the vocal just a little bit. But
that's how you learn. That's how you learn, right?
Yeah.
You made a mistake, and now you know. For the future, don't bury the vocal. quite that much, right? So that's how we learn things.
And it's interesting because like music back then, the vocal was more buried than it is today. It's more vocal focused, or it sits even
vocal forward,
further on top. Yeah, vocal forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, look, that sounds like a great place to end a discussion about reference tracks, which we've managed to have for a long time.
Yes.
But look, I know personally, it's been absolutely brilliant talking to you. I think it's really interesting.
Absolutely.
Your background has
it's
been
been fun.
fantastic. What's next for you? Have you got anything? Are you taking 3 years out to go and learn juggling and tour the world with
do
something completely different?
Yes. No, I'm not. Maybe I should.
Start your own brewery, right?
Yeah, no, I've been there, done that. Bought the t-shirt.
Winemaking. I'm sure that's what's next, right?
No.
Okay.
Distillery? No.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I plans for the future, really. These days I spend a lot of time coaching people and teaching. And I've really enjoyed doing that. It's been very fulfilling for me, more so than mixing for clients, if I'm brutally honest. So I do have a couple of mixing projects coming up in the summer, the end of the summer, which will be fun because I know the people on the projects, so I know it's going to be fun. And then maybe later on the year, I hope to get out another training course, which I've done a few mixing courses, which are pretty much, most of them are all kind of rock, various different styles of rock mixers, following those from start to finish. But this time, what I really wanted to do, and it's funny, the direction that this call has gone on really, is what I want to do is to try and shorten that 10,000 hour thing and concentrate on the critical listening skills and the decision making and the problem solving within mixing. And I'd really love to be able to come up with, well, I'm working on it at the moment actually, that a course where people can kind of accelerate those skills a little bit. And I really want people just to make decisions faster, because that's where the magic happens. And I think people get bogged down too deep in the what ifs and the too many plugins, or and just stuck or plateauing or something, because they just don't know which way to turn. And I think it's the overthinking aspect because of all this information out there on YouTube, and it's overwhelming when you don't know which direction to turn in. So I really want to shorten that journey for people and just encourage people to make decisions and see where it takes them, and not second guess things. And just because, like life, you'd make one decision, it takes you down one path, and off you go. But what would have happened had you made a different decision? I think we kind of touched on that earlier about the BBC and leaving or staying. So you could bring that down into a mix. All those decisions you could have made, it could go in completely different directions. So in essence, it doesn't really matter. Just go with one, just make an effing decision, and go with it and see where it takes you. Because it will sound great. It will still sound great at the end of the day. It'll still work, unless you're making some real god-awful mistake. Or, using saturation at 100% or something on your mix.
And another topic for another day is just that, and that is commitment. And I think that a really, really great way to force yourself forward in your learning and to move your music forward is to commit to a sound. Print that plugin onto your music and move on.
Yes.
And
it'll work wonders for your
don't wait to fix it in the mix.
Yeah. Your confidence is just going to come on leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
It's like a muscle. Just make a decision. The more you use it, the better you'll get at it, and the more confident you'll feel off the back of it. And, that realization of, oh, you know what? That worked. It sounds great. you know, and you've saved yourself so many hours in that mix just by making some kind of almost flippant decisions, really, because I don't know if it's right or wrong. I'm just going to go with something and see what happens. That's what I'd like to do, and in taking away overwhelming indecision for people, to have the confidence and the courage to just go with it. You know, nobody's going to die. It's going to be fine. You know, we're just making music here. So, but I understand that deep desire to produce mixes that sound professional, you know, whatever you want to call it. Me, I'd rather you produce mixes that you're satisfied with and that you feel good about. And then it's all good.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible.
Exactly.
That is incredible. So if somebody wanted to find out more about these courses, where can they find you?
Yeah. There is, of course, I've got the YouTube channel, which is Sara Carter Simply Mixing. But the website is, you know, simplymixing.com. And if you were to kind of subscribe to that, to my email list, you're going to be kept up to date with regard to the release of that course. As I say, it's probably going to be near the end of the year, but if it's sooner, it's sooner. That would be great. And I'm also on Instagram occasionally, Sara Mixes Music. And I've got a private Facebook group as well called Mastering, Mixing and Making Music. You're welcome to sign up, join that. It's free, obviously. But yeah, that's how you can kind of find out more about me. Sara at simplymixing.com. If you've got any burning questions, just email me. Happy to oblige.
Oh, that's great.
We'll
Fantastic.
put a link to all of those in the show notes. So yeah, that's fun. No problem at all.
Wow.
Cool.
Well, Sara, thank you so much for joining us today for this conversation.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, this was a really great conversation, and I think that a lot of people will find this useful.
I hope so. It's been fun. So yeah, it'd be good to do it again sometime.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think there's a
maybe we
lot
could
to pick up on for future conversations. So I think that would be wonderful.
Great.
I think we should get you and Joe Gilder on same show.
I've never met him. I've never met Joe. No, so
We should make that work then.
Well,
That's
then we
fine.
should make that happen.
Yeah.
we probably have very differing opinions on things, but that should make for a good conversation.
Yeah, you'd be surprised.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic.
Well, thanks so much, Sara. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's been so good.
It's been so wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you again next month.
Thank you for listening to Sound Discussion. Your hosts are Ben Holmes, Neil Merchant, and me, Nate Kelms. Our theme song is composed and recorded by Jojo Timmerman. You can find us on the internet at sounddiscussionpodcast.com, or you can drop us a line at sounddiscussionpodcast@gmail.com. Additional show notes for this episode can be found on our website or in the description area of your podcast player. A big thank you to our guest for taking the time to chat with us today, and to you, the listener, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be part of our discussion. We look forward to having you join us again next month on another episode of Sound Discussion.
That kick drum sounds great. I wonder how they did that. And I thought, where on earth did that come from?